I wanted to address some really bad faith talking points about the Cuomo allegations, but I just don't have the energy to do it today. I think that's kind of a stream unto itself. The TLDR of it is that, Cuomo does need to go. And I have actually made a good faith examination of all of the arguments of why he should remain in place. And I found very little substance to every single one of those statements. Basically, a summary of it is that one of the most dominating, the closest to a good faith criticism of the calls for Cuomo to resign is that. Wait, hold on. That's good. Let's de-equip all this. Oh, this is kind of overkill for one whatchamacallit, but whatever. We did it. The closest to a good faith criticism of the calls for Cuomo to resign, in my opinion, is that it could create a power vacuum that allows Republicans to take power in New York government. And I've examined that claim, and the truth is that it's beyond just the obvious point of it's New York. I literally looked at district comparisons between 2018 and 2020, Cuomo's re-election bid versus Biden's election bid in 2020, and Biden outperformed Cuomo in every single district. And Mark Molinaro, the hyper-centrist Republican who took on Cuomo and wound up getting 36% of the vote, outperformed Trump in every single red district. And the only districts that switched hands, there were no districts that Cuomo won that Trump won as well, which implies that there is not much in the way of a pocket of Trump support in Cuomo districts that would magically get a Trump ally into the governorship, let alone overcoming a 24% electoral deficit, right? There were, I think, 4 districts that went for different parties between the 2018 and 2020 elections, specifically governor and presidential. And all of them were districts that went for Mark Molinaro, the Republican in 2018, who got 36% of the vote and lost to Cuomo. They were all districts that went for Molinaro and then voted for Biden. So the overwhelming implication is that the only power vessel for Republicans is to take a hold of that centrist demographic that is willing to vote Republican against a Democrat that they find particularly distasteful, but will vote Democrat against a Republican that they find distasteful. And that is the only vessel to power for Republicans. There is just, from everything I looked at, there is just no evidence to suggest that suddenly catering to Trump voters is going to be the Republican Party's salvation in New York. Again, we're talking a 24-point deficit. The counterexample people have said is that, George Pataki was elected governor in 2002, which was a unique moment in New York history. It was the first gubernatorial election after 9/11, at a point where Republicans were at pretty much the highest level of popularity in the state of New York that they have ever had in modern history. And that popularity precipitously dropped following the Iraq War. And since then, Democrats have been in commanding control of the New York government. So there's very little evidence to suggest that as long as you put somebody with basic executive function in the spot running for New York governor, that they wouldn't win the election. And there's even less evidence to suggest that a Trump ally could ever be governor of New York, because there just isn't there's not the power source there, votes wise. The counter argument to this is people will say, but we also never thought that Trump could become president. Which my answer to you is no. You never thought Trump could become president. I never thought Trump could become president. But there were plenty of people who said, do not sleep on Donald Trump. He could very easily win this. And every single poll before the election, in the places that he won within the margin of error, had him polling within the margin of error. And it just so happened that every single one of those places, Hillary Clinton was slightly ahead. And so the odds, the projections were saying the chances that she loses all of these areas in which she is barely ahead in the margin of error is astronomically low. But the actual polls themselves, the election day outcomes barely outlaid the polls themselves, in that every single area where Hillary was expected to win but Trump won was polled within the margin of error in the week before election day. That is a completely different scenario from a 24 point, a D plus 24 state in which every Republican district was won by, like, at most 8-9%, except maybe like in particular parts of rural New York. And every single Democratic district went overwhelmingly Democrat, right? So yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's really frustrating to have conversations about Andrew Cuomo because I've had some very matter-of-fact things said to me that when I did my independent research about it, turned out to be just absolutely patently untrue. And it's very difficult to reconcile that with what is supposed to be a good faith conversation. So